Hey everybody, it is Mental Health on the Mic. Welcome back. I'm Bennett.
And I'm Lorraine.
You will notice this is our very first in-person podcast. If you're watching
Exciting.
on YouTube, if you don't watch, you listen, you may not care, but that's okay because we care. We think it's pretty awesome. Lorraine, how does it feel to
Yeah.
be in studio?
It feels insane. I've seen so much of the space virtually and now I'm here, so it's great.
And by the way, if you are new to Mental Health on the Mic, we really want to provide a safe space for anybody who is going through anything. You know, everybody is welcome because we are all going through something. Jared, our guest, has his own mental health podcast called My Mate's Mental Health, and he is from Australia. He's our second
Yes.
international
I'm
guest.
so excited. It's great to be able to do this internationally with the technology that we have and
Yeah.
broaden our reach.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, without further ado, let's welcome Jared. He's going to tell you about himself because there's a lot of interesting things about this guy. So, Jared, welcome to Mental Health on the Mic.
Hello, guys. G'day from Australia.
Yes, we are so happy to be here from America and to be able to make this work work with the time zones and all. And it's just an honor to have you, man.
Thank you. No, it's an absolute pleasure to be on the show.
First of all, you're a fellow mental health podcaster. That is how we connected. It is so cool to meet somebody else who has, I believe, a very similar purpose. And I think it's really special. And it's, again, that's part of one of the many reasons why it's such an honor to talk to you. And, you know, funny thing is we'll get to your podcast and how it works, but you always start your episodes with people telling you how they know you. And we're all meeting for the first time. So I think this is a chance for you to get to kind of introduce yourself and you get to talk about who you are. And I'm sure you have so much to share about yourself.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We did meet through the podcasting pipes. So that is really special. But yeah, no, I'm Jared. I guess my interest in mental health really started when I began my career as a registered nurse. I went straight into the psychiatric / mental health nursing sort of route. And I've been, I guess the word is, fortunate enough to work in a variety of different mental health settings from the rehabilitation spaces, the actual psychiatric wards, men's and female prisons. And then now I'm in
Wow.
like a community mental health setting too. And I guess throughout my journey through that, I've been obviously fortunate enough to meet so many people within that space. And one thing that's come out of it is that, you know, they've, I guess, missed opportunities to be able to tell their own stories and everything like that. And I guess that kind of is what sparked me to want to start my own podcast where I could just have my friends on there and for them to, well, obviously in a safe way, share their own stories, whether that's with mental health or just their own resilience, and to just show and kind of like what you guys are doing, show that they can do that in a comfortable way and that hopefully gets normalized so that, you know, people can do it all the time. You know, they can do it when they're hanging out, going for a coffee, when they're at the pub with friends, when they're at school, that it's just, you know, something that happens with friends or even just with people they have met. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, so many things just from that answer alone that we can talk about. I mean, being a registered nurse, what was the path that really you decided you wanted to take on that career? Where did that start for you?
Well, yeah, I guess the honest answer is I didn't know I wanted to do it till I started doing it, especially the mental health part of things. But so in Australia, what happens is your final year of high school, you kind of, you know, they all kind of the student advisors tell you, you know, you should start be thinking about what you need to do after school and that kind of thing. And I always wanted to do something that was kind of directly working with people, which is why I just sort of went with nursing. At that stage, I didn't know if I wanted to do mental health yet. I just thought that, you know, nursing would be an industry where you're going to be working with people. There's no two ways about it. And then whilst I was doing my degree, I had the opportunity to actually do like a mental health placement. And I just found that in that field, I just found it really easy to, I guess, be interested in mental illnesses, in the recovery space, and getting to actually know the patients and consumers in that space as well. Not to say that my placements in the medical world of nursing were bad. I was lucky enough to have really good nurses with me for all my placements. But yeah, just as soon as I did my mental health placement, I think I was like, yep, this is me. So yeah, haven't looked back since.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Lorraine, I mean, any
Yeah.
questions you might have?
No, I love that you're in this like medical space in the field because it's such a unique like perspective that we haven't had on our show yet or that I've known. So I think what you're
Mm.
doing is amazing. And like the whole science behind mental health and that's amazing. So I'm very excited to dive in more to what you have been doing because it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and Lorraine, you're actually your dream is to be a doctor, and you're
It
working towards
is.
that.
Yeah, yeah, I really am interested in the medical field. So this is
Uh,
like so crazy to me.
Yeah, well, I knew
yeah.
she was gonna be excited about this because I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I think that when people think the word nurse, they think physical health. They think you're taking care of people's injuries or helping them with
Right.
their illnesses. But really, I mean, mental health is can be an illness or it can just be a struggle without having a diagnosis or sometimes there is a diagnosis. So and I think you must see so many different things. But I imagine for you that mental health is whereas the world might see it as something that might be subsidiary to sort of the ultimate goal of nursing, which is to treat people's physical illness,
Right.
mental health is just as important, if not more in some cases, I imagine, depending on what you see in your
Mm-hmm.
work.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think once I kind of got into the industry, I realized the funny I always joke and say I'm not a real nurse. And that's not because
Oh.
like I guess
No.
I'm knocking psychiatric nurses' skills, but what I mean when I say that is it's like a completely different sort of nursing, in like the medical field. Um, it's a very task orientated field because it has to be, and it's important that it is that way, and the medical nurses, they're so busy. They have huge patient loads, and yeah, they have, what comes with that is a lot of tasks. But in like kind of the psychiatric nursing world, what a lot of it comes down to is building like a relationship
Mm.
with the, well, in Australia we're using the word consumers now rather than the word patient. So
Mm.
building a relationship with the consumers, because you can imagine, they're meeting me who's like a stranger to them for the first time, and I may be asking them questions about, you know, past trauma, domestic violence, or just about maybe anxiety, which is something they haven't spoken about before. And basically I'm asking them to be quite vulnerable and share things with me they may not have shared with other people. So that's why I find it to be all about that relationship, all about rapport, and building trust, and obviously a professional way as well.
I always think about the personal relationships that there must be between nurse and as they're now called consumers for you guys because I mean I feel like it's a big emotional thing on both ends, right? Because if you're the one going through something and you don't know if or when you're going to get better and then it's up you may feel that it's on you whether or not it's your job alone or you along with doctors and other nurses. I mean, that's that's a bond that you create, I imagine. And it's like you're there to do a job, but there must be, I imagine, that emotional attachment for you.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point, Bennett. Like there's that balance of empathy that you've got to kind of keep in mind where, you're not this sort of like robotic, like stoic person who just listens to someone but can't actually relate to it. You do have to sort of have that empathic response in a way, but at the same time, be able to also let your professional sort of scope of practice guide the way you go rather than reacting to things emotionally as well. And, what comes with that is being able to come home and whether that's, debrief by yourself in the car, or I'm fortunate enough that my wife is happy to listen to how my days are at work, so having that way to vent about it too kind of helps balance out that way of like, not letting the emotions build up too much. But
Right.
you know I'd be lying if I said there wasn't times where I've felt quite strongly about the journey of certain consumers, and I've had to kind of remember that to be professional and do what's best for them rather than what the emotional response sort of indicates.
Mm.
Right.
So have there been times where you feel that there's been particularly challenging to not let emotions get in the way of doing your job?
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess you know, so an example would probably be when I used to work in the jail, and
Mm.
I worked at like a maximum security prison in Sydney, and this was a women's jail. And there's a, what would you call it? There's a lot of competing priorities in prison, between the correctional staff and the health staff. So the prison officers, and this isn't a knock to them, but their job is to make sure that prison runs smoothly, and they kind of, have to do what they can in order to make that happen. And sometimes that's, I guess, not really treating the people in there very well. And yeah, I guess there was just one time where, this one of the girls in there, they were just going through such a hard time. It was their first time in jail. They didn't know anyone in jail. They didn't know how long they were going to be there for. They didn't know who they could, whether they could make a phone call. They didn't know when their next court date was. They were, just obviously feeling so anxious and overwhelmed by it. And seeing that, I was like, why can't just the officers let them out for 5 minutes, let them go on the phone, and then it would kind of fix everything. But, you know, when I talked to the officers about it, they kind of said, like, look, Jared, we know where you're coming from, but if we do that for that person, it's going to probably put them in a worse position than they are now, because it's going to look like we're showing favoritism towards that inmate compared to the other ones. And just sort of remembering that, there's that, you got to have that balance between, your emotional response and kind of the professional boundaries that are in place too. So yeah, my first 2 years of nursing were in the psychiatric ward sort of setting. And then when my wife and I got married, we moved to a different state called Victoria. And while we were there, I was kind of just on, you do your usual thing when you're in a new town, go on like the job search websites, and I saw a role for a position in the correctional setting, and just sort of applied for it. I didn't have to do kind of any other formal training, just kind of orientation stuff once I got the job at the jail. But it was because I was employed as a nurse, which is what I had the qualifications for, that kind of allowed me to work in that setting. But yeah, it's like jail is a really interesting place. I'm not sure if you guys have if you know people who've been in jail, or know friends who work there, or have even watched TV shows about it. Like it's a whole nother world. And in a way, I wish that people could see it. It's like a really good kind of reality check of, what people actually go through in their day-to-day lives. I can give you a story if you want about I guess how.
I'm interested.
Yeah. And so when I was working, this was when I was in Victoria. So this was the men's jail this time. Kind of one of the things we make sure that people have access to is, a phone call to family every now and then, because, just staying attached to the outside world, can really help you get through your sentence. And I remember asking someone, oh, hey mate, do you get to see your family much? Do you get visits, or do you get phone calls? And he goes, yeah, I do. I see my dad a lot. I'm like, oh, great. Like, how often? Then he goes, oh, every day. He's my cellmate. And just hearing that, I was like, oh my goodness. This God. Is I could barely comprehend actually being in jail as an inmate. And then this gentleman is there with his father as his cellmate. And I'm just like, obviously that's possible to happen, but to know that that's the reality for someone was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. But yeah, you just sort of take that on board and try to support them the best way you can.
That's insane.
How do you first react when you get there? Because like you said, it's a whole other world. And I'd like to think, and maybe you can touch on this too, Jared, that there is so much talk about the stigma behind mental health, but there's probably so much stigmatization about jail, because I think, let's be honest, people think of jail, they think, oh, everybody that goes to jail, they've done something bad, so they throw them in the hole. But putting that kind of, I guess you could call it insensitive perspective aside, what you're saying is from being there, you've seen what it's like for these people, because at the end of the day, they are human beings. And I don't think there's anything controversial about recognizing that there are humans in those cells. So for you, I don't know how much you kind of took this all in before you had gotten there, or what your sort of perspective was before you actually took this job on. But when you first entered, I don't know how specific this memory may have been, but what were you feeling when you first entered this place that has been associated with, oh, this is hell, this is supposed to be bad? What are you feeling in that moment?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. A funny story was when I first went for the interview at the jail. I just, you kind of you try to dress nice and everything, and I wore a green button-up shirt. And in Australia, the shade of green I wore is the exact same color that the inmates actually wore. So
Oh
I,
my,
I,
no
I
way.
was, yeah,
Oh,
sitting in the I guess the interview room waiting for the panel to be ready, and I noticed every officer that walked past kind of like had to do like a double take, like, hang on, was like an inmate sitting in there? And then the panel members walked out, and I just like kind of saw their eyes get wide and the jaws drop, and they're like, oh, make sure you never wear that color again. And I was like,
ah,
well, what do you mean? And then they like kind of said like, look out the window, and I'm like, oh, I see. It was all the exact same color,
That's
oh
which
my
was pretty
God.
so
hilarious.
funny.
But yeah, my first day working there, so this was in the men's jail in Victoria. That was a medium security correctional facility, which meant the inmates could kind of walk to and from, medical appointments, or if they were going to do work or go to lunch, they could actually walk unescorted. So on my first day, we had like an orientation of the correctional facility, and it was just myself, another nurse, and then kind of like the clinical nurse educator. She was showing us around. So there was three of us, and we were just walking past like groups of maybe 5 or 6 blokes, um, massive guys, all over 6 foot, all
Oh
massive,
my
and
gosh.
just walking past them. And I was very scared. Like I was like, maybe one on one I'd be able to defend myself and run away, but against these guys, if they wanted to hurt me,
No,
they
they're,
would.
yeah.
And so yeah, I just remember like it'll always be in my head. Like my heart was beating so fast. I was definitely anxious about it. I was scared walking past these guys. But then as I got to know them in my role, I realized that they are human beings, like you said. And the other thing is like none of them really want to be there, and that
Mm-hmm.
really just shows that it's really they are human. They're not worse than us in any sort of way. They've just sort of made some choices which have led them there. But I'm a bit advocate for saying, it's sort of their environment which has caused them to be there. Like they may not have been set up to win in the first place, which is why they've sort of ended up there. But yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
first day, I was very scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was, always making sure I was kind of close to a correctional officer just in case anything went wrong.
Right.
When I was working in the jails, I was still working as a mental health nurse there. Like my role was
Okay.
still as a mental health nurse, but
Mm-hmm.
just because of the environment, you'd work, I guess, in collaboration with the correctional officers too.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, it was interesting to work with them because
Mm-hmm.
to be frank, they wouldn't really look at the inmates. Well, sorry, some of them wouldn't look at the inmates as human beings anymore.
Yeah.
They had just been working in jails for so long that it had sort of really jaded them and
Yeah.
demoralized them in a way that they
Mm-hmm.
would just look at anyone in green as kind of scum of society, which is totally not the right way to do it.
Right. So I commend you for, seeing them still as human beings and doing what you have done because they deserve that.
Well, look, there's going to be no what's the term they use, like restorative or recovery sort of focused justice if we keep the system the way it is. If we keep saying
Yeah.
like, oh, well, once you've gone to jail, that's it. We're going to keep having this revolving door of the correctional facility industry sort of thing. So I think it is really important to really acknowledge that they are human beings and just like
Mm-hmm.
us, and we're no better than them in any way. And yeah, just to be able to help them in whatever way we can.
Yeah, I hope we can help to amplify the voice you have because
Yes.
you, I mean, it's one thing to kind of hear someone who's been through it, whether they're an inmate or they've been in the past, but the fact that you see it from that perspective of, you're helping them, you're taking care of them, you're somebody who can say that having seen these people, you want to be an advocate for them. You want to make people understand that they are human beings, and I also commend you for that. If it's possible, I don't know how in depth this is, but like maybe both for the registered nurse career and the working with correctional officers path, I'm wondering if you could walk us through like a day in the life, because I'm kind of curious about what that might look like on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'll go through what it was like in the when I was working in the jail first. You'd kind of you'd have like your nursing uniform. It's not really scrubs. It's sort of just like it's like scrubs slash smart casual clothing that you'd wear. But like there are a few funny things about I guess jail. So when you come to work, your bag has to be transparent. So I just had to bring like a clear
Mm-hmm.
plastic sort of bag because so you couldn't smuggle anything in. It was obvious to see what was in there. And when you get to work, you kind of go through like the security check like you would at an airport. So there's like a big scanner thing. Your bag goes through like a belt that sort of looks
Conveyor
into
belt,
everything that's
yeah.
in there. Yeah, yeah. And then you got to chuck on your duress alarm and all that kind of stuff. And
You take off your
um
shoes. Is that a
take
thing?
take off your
Yeah.
shoes, take off your jewelry, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, basically that's even before you've gotten to your desk sort of thing. And then you go through and you'd get like a um maybe like a visitor's pass, or you'd have your own swipe card to get you throughout the facility and everything. And then when I was working in the men's jail in Victoria, what you'd get is sort of like a list of the inmates you're going to see for the day. And they'd have just a number of reasons on there. Like one would say, like, I want to see a psych nurse feeling very anxious, or want to see a psych nurse, I'm feeling really suicidal, or I'm hearing voices. You just a myriad of reasons for why they'd want to talk to you. And then you go into your office, you'd sort of schedule out your day. And then, you just see all these people who have appointments booked in with you. And in the most simpler way, your job was to like assess and refer accordingly. So if you saw someone and you're like, okay, maybe they need to see the GP for a medication review, they might want to start medication for anxiety, you could see them. Or if someone was, floridly psychotic, you'd refer them to the psychiatrist who review them and maybe consider treatment options or something like that, or maybe even transferring them to like the psychiatric unit, either in the jail or the one outside of it. But again, it does all come back to building that relationship, because for some people, they didn't need to be put on medication. So there's no referral that needs to be made. It's just kind of touching base with them and maybe discussing some positive coping strategies to really get them through their day and everything like that. And that would include things like, mindfulness, grounding exercises, sleep hygiene, maybe encouraging them to go to work, or putting them in contact with the, I guess, support services to get in touch with family, that kind of stuff. And then, I guess that'd be a day. You'd finish off and then go through the big security check again and then go home.
What is probably one of the biggest things that you've gained from experiencing all of that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. It's a very good question. Have you guys heard of the term like vicarious trauma? Have you heard of that term?
Is that like seeking? I mean, because you hear like living vicariously through someone else. Is that like a feeling someone else's trauma in a way that you haven't actually been there, but you kind of feel it emotionally? Is that in the ballpark?
Yeah, totally, totally. So, and obviously it sort of happens without you knowing, sort of thing. And I sort of found that after I'd been there for maybe like, let's say 10 months, I don't know why I got this feeling, but I just started to picture or started to plan how I would cope if I had to go to jail. Now,
Wow.
I'm obviously not doing anything.
Right.
I hope I'm not
illegal.
doing anything that's
Disclaimer.
that's going to land me there. But I just found it, I'd leave work some days and I'd kind of hear the stories of what people would have to deal with, where, an example is that like, oh, look, these guys are standing over me for my medication. This is obviously what the the inmates would tell me, they're like, there's a group of guys who are just standing over me for my medication every day. If I don't give it to them, they're gonna bash the crap out of me, or just make my life hard. And that, amongst other prison politics, I'd find myself thinking about how I would deal with that. So what I kind of learned from it, and I guess this comes back to my thing about empathy and their professional boundaries, is like really finding that balance of being able to leave work at work, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But also realizing that, there's people in there who, are my age, or back then, it was about three years ago, around that age sort of thing. And that they just want to have the life I have right now. Like what they talk about is, they'd be like, man, I'd do anything to just not be here and be able to just go to work, go home to my missus, cook a dinner and go to bed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing when I leave here.
Right.
Like, so it's a really sort of like humbling thing. It gives you that perspective to just have that gratitude about your own life. As cliche as that might sound, it was like a really good sort of reminder to be thankful for the life I have.
Wow. And I imagine, there's different levels of intensity that you probably experience with being in the jail and then being a registered nurse. I imagine that a lot of gratitude comes with that as well. I mean, again, the same question about walking us through your day, but also, what is that feeling like of helping people in a medical way?
Yeah. So I guess, a day for when I used to work in the psychiatric wards. The first place I worked, it's probably over 100 years old. And I'm talking like, if you picture the really old psychiatric hospitals that you kind of see in movies and TVs, like
Wow.
the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or like in like American Horror Story, that's what this facility looked like. And so working there, and again, what your day looked like in that setting was really, I guess the word is institutionalized. Like, I'd spend probably the first 2 or 3 hours of my day giving out medication. And I really agree. Medication in the right way can be very helpful for some people, but even for me, just working there, the role became so mundane, because it was, you get there, give medication, and that's about all you did. But then when I went from there to kind of the hospital setting, which was kind of like the more acute sort of mental health setting, it was actually called the psychiatric intensive care unit. So you can imagine you have your ICU for where people go if they have like huge car accidents or really big cardiac issues. I was working in the mental health equivalent of that. So these are people who are extremely psychotic, or currently having a manic episode, acutely suicidal. And yeah, in that, my role was very different. So you'd kind of get to work, you'd receive handover from, the previous shift, night shift sort of thing. And your day would be a lot about sort of monitoring the consumer's response to medication, kind of, again, building that relationship with them. So, maybe you could pick up on certain nuances that other clinicians haven't seen, sitting in on doctors' reviews, and kind of just trying to create a care plan for them so that they can, really, the goal is to get them out of hospital as quickly as they can and as safely as they can. And but the reality of that too is, if you can imagine, if people are really psychotic, really manic, or under the influence of drugs. And when I was working there, there was like a methamphetamine sort of like I guess pandemic sort of thing
Oh,
happening.
wow.
Like, there was just so much ice in the area, so there was so many people coming in with what we call drug induced psychosis, where because of the substances they've used, they'd actually become psychotic. And
Wow.
what that would result in sometimes is having to actually like seclude them, put them into a slot, and inject them with medication.
Oh my God.
And I can never say that sentence comfortably, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously the only reason you do that to someone is because it's the last resort and the safest thing you can do for
Right.
them. Because they could be walking around the ward, with voices telling them that they need to attack someone because that person over there is a Nazi and they're Jewish, but they could be looking at someone who's a very vulnerable, young lady. So you've got to sort of mitigate those risks and make these huge calls where you're going to be restricting someone, taking away a lot of their rights and injecting them with medication. And look, like I've been in, wrestles where I've been on top of people and then with a needle in my hand and, hitting them with that cold steel. And it never feels natural. It never feels like, the right thing to do. But like that is just what you had to do to make it the safest place for yourself, your colleagues and the other patients in the unit as well. So yeah, that was pretty wild working in that setting. And I guess one big takeaway I got from that was, again, another cliche, but just don't do drugs, because it's sort of like, especially actually mainly ice, because it's just such a potent drug and it's so addictive so quickly, and the recovery from it is like at least 2 years kind of thing before you're sort of back at baseline. So that was
That's
one big thing about it too. But just with mental health in general, I think that was sort of where the starting point was, of where I was like, there could be so much more we could be doing. And perhaps even these conversations like what you guys are doing and what I'm hoping to do with my podcast could be a starting point for it as well. Just that safe space to talk really might make the difference for some individuals.
Wow. Lorraine, do you have any reactions, questions?
I do. I think it's a really unique perspective that you have, because I think you mentioned this earlier on, that no limited people get to see what you've seen. Like there's no cameras of like, there's no, reality. Like we can't see from the outside what it's like in those prisons, in that environment. And so it's crazy how you go from what you see and like these poor people and, seeing their struggles and trying to help them, but then also going home at the end of the day, like the completely different environments that you're immersed in every single day. How do you detach from work? How does, like, mentally, how do you like prepare to like go home and unwind and put your mind at ease after you've seen all those like things? And
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It took me a long time to sort of I guess be able to seamlessly detach from it. And I think it's in a way it's human to be somewhat attached to those sort of events in your life, because like we said, they're human beings as well. It's not like we can just switch off and be robotic about it.
right.
But I think one thing I realized was that I had to sort of, I guess, come to the conclusion that and it'll sound so ridiculous that I was thinking this way before, but that I'm not going to save every single person I talk to. I'm not a super nurse. I'm not, there's not going to be someone who comes in who's going to be suicidal and just meet me and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not suicidal anymore, or something like that. And sort of realizing that as long as I did the best I could, as long as I advocated for the patient, and as long as I did my best to build that relationship with them, once I executed those things, no matter how the day went and no matter how sort of the shift was afterwards, I felt that I could go home and have that peace, knowing, I've done my part.
Right, you've
I've done the best.
part.
Yeah,
Like you can only do so much for these people. You know what I mean? Like you're doing God's work though. So
I don't know if it's like a good idea not to kind of draw this comparison, but I think that as much as what you do, Jared, is so unique and different from what everybody listening is going to say that they've ever experienced, I think there's something that I find in common with just like the very human thing of like, if you're helping someone, let's say you're just talking to a friend and trying to help them, or you're trying to be the hero of someone's life in a much less literal way. Like, I think for me, part of my life and my past is that, like, in high school, for instance, I took on this role of literally feeling like a therapist to everyone I encountered, because I I'm proud to say I think I'm a very empathetic person, and that empathy kind of worked against me in some ways where I just took on so much of people's distress because I was someone they could go to, they could talk to. I'm not getting any benefit. They're usually treating me like crap in return, and friendships, relationships could get very toxic. And I know it's a completely different topic, but the only reason I bring it up is because, again, without knowing if this is the best way to put it when we're talking about something as serious and as impactful as the work you're doing, but I gotta imagine that I just drew that comparison because I think that all of us can relate to the feeling of wanting to be somebody's hero at some point in our lives. So for you to have to take that on probably on a daily basis and maybe dealing with that stress sometimes, I mean, I don't know if there's anything there, but I imagine that, on steroids, that's what you're feeling is it's hard to not always help when you can't.
No, Bennett, I think that's a very, very real comparison. And it's nice to kind of, hear someone who's sort of like felt a similar thing to what not just me, but other psych nurses have felt as well. Um, you know, taking on someone else's problem, whether that's if they've forgotten their lunch for school, if they got a flat tire, or if they're going through a really, really tough time with their mental health, you're still taking on their problems. And you don't have to be a psych nurse to sort of sit there with that person and have that empathy towards them. So no, I think it's a really, really realistic comparison, and it's definitely okay that you've done that. But that would have been pretty intense for you, Bennett, in high school to be kind of doing that for people. Just because it was something you'd naturally do from the sounds of things. It wasn't like, I guess, like an effort for you. It's just kind of how you reacted to things from other people.
Yeah, no, if I could, pat myself on the back a little if I must, I think that I've overcome that. I think I've learned how to only give when I can receive, and I think that's a very real thing that we all should learn how to do. And it's from a place of self-love that I've probably hadn't found at that point in my life. But I think that again, while not all of us are doing the work you're doing, where you're seeing such intense things, and you probably feel this immense pressure to take care of people, I think that everyone in life probably has been through something when it comes to needing to care for others, whether it be, I mean, I don't know, like, I wonder, like, if people, I'm even thinking medically, like what if you have like someone in your family who you need to take care of, and that's a lot of pressure on someone, and that those emotions when you can't always help even the people that you're assigned to help with because they're your family. Or I think that this is in my mind, I'm just getting this whole, all these different things are just coming up for me because it's a human thing you're dealing with. I think your work is a human thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's with people that I guess the thing is it could happen to anyone. And it could be happening to people, nearest and dearest as well. So yeah, while there is that, time of the day where I'm, quote unquote, paid to do what I do as well, that doesn't mean that when I finish work, I'm not gonna, listen to my wife, listen to my friends about what sort of days they've had, or if someone of my siblings come to me with a tough time that they're going through. It's not like I'm going to say, "Oh, I'm off the clock, guys. I can't help you with that."
Yeah.
Like, peace out.
It's yeah. Like you said, it's something that's we're kind of all going to have access to at some point, and we might need someone, or someone might need us, kind of thing. And it is about finding that balance of how much you can help people without, I guess, without it being too much on you as well.
Right.
And now that you have your own podcast, which I don't know if we're diving into.
Yeah, that's it. That was a good segue.
Yeah, good segue. I'm really excited to hear more about the reason why you started your podcast and where you're planning on going with it.
Yeah, I want to hear how that all started, how the idea came about. Let's go for it.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, yeah, obviously it's not a surprise anymore that I've, had that time to work in that mental health space, and just sort of see what that's like. So I've always loved podcasts. I don't know about you guys, but I guess, for probably 12 years, I've just loved listening to podcasts, whether it was, just I'm going for a walk or usually going to and from places. I think during a commute, it's like the best time to listen to it. So always been listening to podcasts. And then I kind of, when I was sort of into the mental health stuff, I sort of wanted to have a podcast where it was about mental health, but it wasn't sort of like a clinical sort of discussion. It wasn't about, sort of like diagnosing things. It wasn't about sort of the best literature or the best treatment interventions and that kind of stuff, which I think they're all great stuff, and there certainly is a space for that. But I just wanted something, and maybe it's something similar to what you guys had in mind, that would normalize conversation about mental health. Hopefully, be an example of how to have conversations. Obviously, not in a scripted way, but just to sort of show, especially guys, that talking about mental health, especially with your friends, is something you can do and perhaps something you should do, and mainly something that's okay to do. Because, and this will probably be in when I bring it out in the next episode I drop. One of the things my friend said was he was going through just, a really, really tough time in his life. And he was like, look, what I was going through, I was ready to take to my grave, and I wasn't telling anyone about it. And I wasn't, even talking to my partner about it. But then he said, but if someone asked me about how I was going and really, really asked me, I probably would have told them. So just kind of hearing that and realizing that, it's because we're so, I guess, scared to be vulnerable, or because we may not have the right language yet to articulate to others how we feel, or even to know how to ask other people how they're going in a more deeper way. That's sort of why I wanted to start the podcast. And just in terms of, I guess, where I drew inspiration from it, there's a few podcasts that I've really enjoyed over the years. One's called Dill and Friends, where it originally was a guy who used to play in the AFL in Australia, which is like the equivalent to the NFL,
okay.
over there. So it's the Australian Football League. And he started the show with just getting, other football players on and talking about their careers. And then it sort of developed into talking about, I guess, their vulnerabilities throughout their careers as well. And just sort of hearing those candid conversations really inspired me. And then, kind of led to me wanting to start my own podcast. And we had a big lockdown here in Australia too. I'm not sure if you guys heard about it. There was a lot of like TikToks and memes going on about how severe the lockdown was, but having that lockdown helped with it as well.
I say this with so much sincerity, Jared. I think that it's pretty much exactly what like my idea for the show was, and Lorraine came in season 2, and I created the show mid-pandemic after actually receiving my own medical diagnosis of epilepsy, and I was looking for an outlet to talk about mental health. And being a guy, I relate to that too. Like, I think again, what I say with sincerity is that I am glad there are so many shows like this, and that we have these similar things, because we're not in the business of trying to outdo any other podcast. I'm all for collaborating and for shining light on what other people are doing, because the more of these shows that are out there, the more we can help people. I think that when you're doing a podcast, which is a creative outlet, which is also creativity, there's originality there, and there's a lot of things that can be similar, but it's all about everybody's unique perspective. And the more perspectives that we have, the more people we can help. Because I think this is an area where the more mental health podcasts there are, the better, because the more people across the whole world, not to mention, you've probably seen this. I mean, we're talking to you right now, and this is an international conversation, but podcasts have the power to reach people literally all over the world, as I'm sure you've seen. So I think that, I imagine that you share this similar sentiment, and that, it's all about just how we can get more people, something for them to listen to that makes them feel less alone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I 100% agree. And, just touching on that note of, wondering, is the podcast too saturated with content already? Like, I don't think it ever will be. And like, the reason I found your guys' podcast was because I made mine, and, because it just sort of made me more aware of what else was out there, and sort of putting my show out there. kind of led me to yours. And now I have a whole another podcast I can enjoy because I've discovered you guys as
Oh,
well.
that's
Um,
great. No, I think we're really building a great community
Yeah.
of
exactly. Yeah,
in this one
exactly.
category under mental health, this big umbrella. I think the internet is a very interesting place, but I think a really positive thing that comes out of it is giving us the opportunity and this platform to do this. So I'm glad that you found us,
Yeah.
and now that we found you, like it's like a little collab.
It's great. It's networking. I mean, it really
Networking.
is.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good to meet people that have the similar purpose and a few things like, okay, so another thing, not only do we both have a mental health podcast, but we both have a show that's not about being necessarily educational, or if anything, the guests are the ones that kind of drive whatever, things are to be learned. We're here to kind of just give people the platform, but so you have a very similar concept. You're interviewing your friends, and I also am just curious how that came about, because it was the kind of thing where you're just like, well, I know a lot of people that have been through stuff, so this could be a great platform for them. I mean, how did you go about kind of figuring out, who would be good? And I'm imagine you're reaching out to people, and I'm sure you're creating a buzz among your own network of how you can get your circle involved in this project.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a funny thing how, I made this podcast and then it ends up being the guests who do the majority of the heavy lifting for it. So I always tell that to people. They're like, mate, congratulations on the podcast. Well done. And I'm like, thank you. But, make sure you thank the guests as well, because they do all the heavy lifting. But of course, with every episode I do, I always ask people who are coming on, number one, that they want to come on, but number two, what they're comfortable to share. Because, I think there is a fine line between what you talk about with your friends in privacy and what you sort of put on a podcast,
Right.
as I'm sure you guys are aware of as well. But yeah, I kind of just, I knew that all of my friends would either be happy to come on for a chat or have something to talk about themselves. And again, because like I said, I sort of started this during a big lockdown that we had here in Australia, and it actually ended up being a great opportunity to catch up with friends because we just hadn't seen each other for so long. And by doing the podcast, it allowed us to have these conversations that, maybe if there was no lockdown, we never would have had, because we'd never have a space to do it. And it's been really exciting because of that. And I think it's given way to a lot of fruitful conversations that have helped me, but hopefully other people as well. So yeah, big shout out to the guests I've had.
Oh yeah, they're great. I mean, I was just listening to one. I can't remember his name, but he just become a dad, and it was so interesting hearing you ask him about how fatherhood was for him emotionally. Because I mean, I don't know if you want to touch on that example, but like he talking about his little girl and the world she's growing up in now, and how she's gonna be in this generation that's so aware of mental health. I mean, that must have been a powerful one that you did.
Yeah, it's like I really enjoyed that conversation. Like he's a guy, and I don't know how to, I guess, describe it, but he's like a country boy, very sort of like we have a saying in Australia called "she'll be right," where it basically just means don't worry about it, everything's going to be okay. That's just kind of how I've always looked at him. And then he came on this podcast and just articulated himself so well. Spoke about his emotions and what he's been through whilst becoming a father so well. And again, it was perhaps a conversation we never would have had if it wasn't for this space. But it was really nice. It was really, really nice to hear what he had to say. So yeah, thankful for it.
I think it says a lot about you and your network and your community, your friends, like that you all are so able to open up about this, and like the environment that I'm curious, the environment that you guys grew up in, because being adults now, I don't know how long it's been this way, but it seems like you and your friends, like you are in that environment where it's okay to talk about mental health and this thing that has been stigmatized for so long. I guess I don't know if you want to talk about when mental health became something you really started caring about, or at what point in your life, but it's not every day that you, not to mention all these people who are your friends, you guys are just so comfortable talking about it. And where did that start, do you think?
Yeah. Might be hard to pinpoint an exact time, but I think in general, so it wouldn't be something we'd talk about much, especially in high school. I think it was just very much about like, you know, have fun, um, a very light check in, everything okay, and sort of just go from there. You know, as long as you're happy, keep pushing on. But I think once we sort of finished high school and we sort of went on our own journeys, and that sort of gave way to, I guess, just experiences that were so diverse for everyone else. Like, I guess one example I had was meeting a friend at university um, who had like lost both his parents. Until that stage, I'd never met someone who had been through anything like that, and then being able to talk to him about it and sort of the way he was able to open up to me. I don't know if you'll think this is odd of me saying it, but it's almost addictive to have these deep conversations with people where you're vulnerable and they may feel okay with that, and vice versa too. So I felt like as soon as high school finished, I loved it.
When you have those special and vulnerable conversations with another human being like that, it's so impactful. Like you really feel immersed in that person's head space and like their life, and you feel it feels good knowing that that person is comfortable enough to share things with you. So I think having that feeling of wow, this person opened up to me, I think that's a big part in it.
And I think that the probably biggest human desire we all share is to feel loved and understood and heard, listened to. Quite literally, doing a podcast and having people come on and get to talk about themselves and their journey. I mean, I know it's a very non-selfish thing to try to help others through these platforms, which we have, which you have, Jared. But I mean, I don't know. I think Lorraine makes a great point, and you know, it is a big deal because talking about your feelings, while it's great to have someone to listen to you, is so vulnerable. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure that you've seen that in with the guests you've had and just people, you know, putting microphones aside. I mean, throughout your life, I'm sure you found that, you know, that bond that you create through talking about deep stuff is also it's hard because you're realizing that wow, like I've been through a lot and this is hard, life is hard, but having people by your side makes it easier, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one big thing that Nick, so he was on the first episode, that he said is um when he's been vulnerable with me or even with other people in the past, the funny thing is he actually isn't um looking to us to give him an answer. It's actually just to listen.
Mm.
And, you know, just kind of realizing that maybe sometimes we don't ask other people about what's going on with them is because we feel like we might have the obligation to fix it there and then, where the reality is they just kind of want someone to listen to them and not even give them advice. They might be sick of receiving advice actually, and that they just want to be heard and know that they've been heard and that someone's going to be there for them when they need them, if they need them, but mainly there for them for the journey.
Wow. Lorraine, any thoughts?
Right? Because I feel like, you know, in our heads, things build up, feelings build up, thoughts build up. And, you know, sometimes we all just really crave like a release, like to like tell someone and let the things that are inside out and have someone hear them. So I agree. Like people just want that. And I think with the pandemic, that made it really hard because everyone was secluded to their homes and that lockdown. So I think having podcasts like ours or, you know, certain, you know, things on social media that could help people when they couldn't be with other human beings, I think that's really amazing that, you know, even though they couldn't, or, you know, FaceTime or ways that we could communicate, which we found really helpful that we didn't know was going to be helpful until the pandemic hit.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, I think it was Jack, and I think it's the same person I'm thinking of who just became a dad, if I'm correct, Jared.
That's right. Yep.
And he said something really interesting. I wrote this down because I listened to it. You know, he talked about us coming a long way as like society in terms of talking about mental health, but I think the point I can't say it verbatim, but is that we still need to break the barriers in terms of addressing specific issues and like calling things by name. And like, we can say that, someone's dealing with mental health struggles, but, um, calling things by name, whether it's depression or schizophrenia, I think that, without obviously outing someone for what they're dealing with, but recognizing what these issues are, because I think that as much as we've come a long way in terms of saying that like mental health is okay to talk about, we still have to educate ourselves and learn about the specific issues. And again, without making it about, oh, well, so and so has this or that, and revealing all their information, we have to understand what is anxiety, what is depression, and what is schizophrenia, what is really anything across the spectrum that might be mild, might be severe. I mean, I imagine that was pretty eye opening for you when he said that.
Yeah, it was really, really great to hear him say that. And it's something that's so true, because you certainly would support someone differently based on, I guess, yeah, what sort of diagnosis they have, and obviously differently what they're going through. But using the right language about if it is schizophrenia, what you need to talk about for that person will be different to what you need to talk about for someone who's going through anxiety. And you're absolutely right. Like that's why it's important to kind of know what these mental illnesses are, and then knowing how we can support that person, whether it's, do they need to see a psychiatrist, or how can I just help them as a friend, or what do I do in a time of crisis for this person? Because that's certainly a barrier. If so, before I was a psychiatric nurse, I wouldn't know what to do with someone if they told me they were going through schizophrenia, or even like a really severe anxiety episode. I wouldn't know what to do. And I don't think it's, I mean, obviously it's nursing that's helped educate me, but I think there's definitely scope. And I'm a big advocate for schools making it a part of their sort of curriculum to put
Yes.
these specific mental health
Oh my
focuses in
gosh, that's a
from
whole
like
other
kindergarten.
conversation.
Yeah.
As a high school student myself, I feel like there is so much more that school systems could do in terms of that. So I
Yeah.
really hope that at some point that changes, because I think it's so vital and so important.
It would change the world. Like
It
if
would. It
imagine
would.
from kindergarten you were just being taught how to, yeah, deal with, regulate your emotions, recognize emotions in other people, and then just knowing what anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, or everything like that is, you'd be able to carry yourself and your friends through life in a completely different way.
Right.
I have one more question for you, Jared, because you're always interviewing. Actually, you know what? Make that too. I'm curious. How is it for you being on the other end? I mean, you're asking people questions. What's it like to be asked the questions?
It's yeah, it's been really exciting. Like I've tried not to think too much about how I was going to respond to certain questions. I kind of like that you kind of, you didn't send me any questions ahead of time. I was really happy with
Yeah,
that,
you're just
because
thrown in and we're
yeah, no, I think it's a really good thing to do, because it sort of just allowed me to speak freely. And I guess the answers you got are complete, true, and organic answers in a way
Yeah.
because of that.
That's great.
But it's allowed me to reflect and really realize how great my guests have been, and to just also have that sort of empathy to see, like, oh, this is what it's like to be asked questions,
Yeah.
and maybe rethink the way I go about it. Hopefully I haven't made anyone feel uncomfortable, but just knowing that,
No.
oh, wow, I need to, come up with a cool answer, sort of thing. Like,
No,
I just hope,
oh
hope
my
they're not thinking of
Uh,
that.
You've been great.
yeah, we love authenticity here on this show,
Yes.
and so do you on yours. And speaking of which, your show, we'll make sure to plug it before we sign off here, Jared. But
Yes.
I really feel like when I'm listening to episodes of My Mate's Mental Health, that I'm listening to genuine conversations. That, of course, it is an interview, and you do such a great job with your questions, but it is organic. It's real, and you can tell that you know the people, and even if you didn't know them, you could tell that you care about mental
The
health.
heart.
The heart. With that, my question for you as we close out here is, quite simply, what would be your advice to somebody who is struggling with anything regarding a mental health journey?
There's obviously so much we could get into with that question, but I think there's two components to that. If if you have if you think that your friends or your family don't want to hear about it, I I encourage you to reconsider that, because there is a chance that they may not know about what you're kind of going through right now. And again, them just hearing about it might be a big difference for you as well. But on the other side of it, like we said earlier on, mental health is going to be something that, or mentally ill health is something that we're all going to have to deal with in some capacity. You don't just have to be working in the industry. So I think that there is definitely merit to, like your sign says back there, check in with yourself, but check in with your friends too.
Yes.
Um, and that, that's not just like, maybe sending them a meme or sending them a TikTok. I think it's got to be a bit more deeper than that, and
Right.
actually scheduling time and prioritizing time to sit down with them and just, go for a coffee or go for a meal and try to talk with them. And even just ask that vulnerable question about, like, you know, you could maybe say, look, things haven't been seemed right with you guys lately, or like, when we caught up the other week at that party, you seemed a bit isolated. Is everything okay? Because if we sort of pussyfoot around questions like that, that's when things can get missed, and that's when people might feel like they don't have the support that in fact is actually there.
There's like this default answer. We text, "How are you?" or you say, "How are you?" It's like, "I'm good, I'm fine." And then they just move on. And then it's just like,
Yeah.
there's so many things that could be missed. Probably 8 times out of 10, that person's not great or fine.
So be the person who texts somebody else, but also be the person who will respond to a text with the deeper answer than just "I'm fine." Put yourself
but
out
I
there.
think it's like it's not just asking how, like what Jared was saying, like pose it in a way where, I've seen this, or like you've seemed this way, like not just like a "how are you," like not a 3-worder, like really go like make it more of a personable, "I'm here, I care, I want to listen, I want to hear you out."
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, because like if you guys got a message from a friend and they said, like, hey, you seemed off the other night, would you be angry about that? Like, and if they were checking in?
No.
So yeah, that's the thing. Like, even if you're okay, you could be like, oh no, maybe I was off, but I was just tired. Everything's okay. But it could be the other end where you're like, yeah, look, I've actually been wanting someone to ask me about that.
Right.
I'm going through this and that. And it's almost like it's a win-win if you ask that question. It's either going to be they actually are okay and they were just tired or something like that, or they want to have a bigger conversation about it, and it could actually save a life at some stage. So definitely worth having it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jared, before we go, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being a part of the show.
I love your accent, by the way.
Ah.
I have a thing. It's like I have a friend from New Zealand, and
who was on the podcast.
Who was on a podcast.
Yeah. I listened to that the other day. Yeah.
You did?
Oh, really?
Oh my God.
Yeah, anxiety one. Yeah.
Yes,
it was awesome.
I love
Thank
her
you.
accent.
Thank
like
you.
I literally have her voice as my voice mailbox on my phone. So when anyone calls me, it's like, "Lorraine can't come to the phone right now," and it's the best thing I ever had in my life. So not only is your expertise amazing, but your accent, I'm sure all of our listeners will love that.
I want to give you a chance to plug the podcast.
Yes,
Anything
plug
you want
it.
Socials, website, whatever you got.
Oh yeah, look, why not? It's just the podcast is called My Mate's Mental Health. You can access it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. And the Instagram for it's the same title, just My Mate's Mental Health. No spaces or capitals or anything like that. But guys, like, it's been an absolute pleasure being on this show, and I really love what you guys do. I think the dynamic you guys bring really makes it feel for the guests that it is just this conversation that they can be comfortable having.
Yes.
And the topics you guys cover as well. I mentioned the one with your friend on it, Lorraine, speaking about anxiety, and the exact story she had about, going off to university and building relationships and that kind of thing there. It's such a relatable conversation to have, and I'm sure it's rubbed off on some people as well. So please keep up the good work, guys. Like, it's definitely encouraging and really heartening for me as well. So thank you.
The pleasure is all ours, Jared.
Yes.
And so thank you guys for if you like Mental Health on the Mic, thank you so much for watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. You can check us out too, mentalhealthonthemic.com or at Mental Health on the Mic on Instagram or TikTok. Jared, thank you so much for being our guest this week.
Cheers, guys. It was a pleasure.